As our lives continue to progress as fathers, my father was the one who had the baton. He got that baton at first from his father. Well, you would like to think so, right? But he lost his father in civil war in Liberia. And when he came over here, he never got the chance to really build that relationship and ask him what it was like to be a dad and, hey, my son is doing this, what should I do? So essentially, that baton was almost dropped. So here my dad is picking up that baton and running his own race, running for his life to try to protect and provide for the son that he now has. He's doing it the best he can, and he passes me the baton. My job is not to look back at him and tell him all the things he did wrong. My job is to take the baton and run my own race as fast as I possibly can so that I'm able to pass the baton to my son. But we always have to remember that sometimes the baton might get dropped. Sometimes you might pick up a baton that got dropped in the mud. It might be a little dirty, a little wet, but your job is not to look back. You're not supposed to look back and say, hey, these are all things you did wrong. I don't need you, and blah, 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 blah. Take the baton and run with it.
You know, it's not every day that snafus happen. Well, maybe it is every day that snafus happen, but today we had a guest who wasn't able to make it at the last minute, and I'm having a conversation in the lobby of the podcasting studio, and I meet this amazing human who I'm sitting across from right now, and we're going to introduce ourselves to each other because we've been having one of the best conversations I've had in a long time. And I said, you got to get in the podcasting chair, and we got to do this live, at least in person live. And so I'm Scott Danner with the High Performance Life podcast, and I'm here with my guest.
Myer, Krah, what's going on, man? I can't believe the conversation we've had already. Like, if we had the cameras on and rolling, it'd be crazy. I literally just walked up the stairs thinking that I was going to grab a piece of chocolate and head on to see my boy Stoney just to talk about a couple of production stuff. But I'm glad I got a chance to sit down and just ask you a few questions. Why are you here today? What are you doing? And before you know it, we're into heartfelt conversations.
Deep.
So let me introduce myself because we really didn't even get a chance
Yeah,
to
do it, please.
My name is Myer, Krah. I've been here for over almost 10 years now. I'm in the Navy. I'm a surface warfare officer. Played football for most of my life. I played at the United States Naval Academy from 12 to 16, and now I'm a host of a podcast called Here for the Dads podcast. I got 4 boys, man. I got a set of twins, 1 year old, and then I got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and that's pretty much my life right now. All I do is kind of just get around. I talk to people. I love doing that, and just having this conversation is really like pumping my blood, and I feel it, and I'm extremely passionate about it, and just knowing that you've lived some life and you've had some experiences that I'm gaining advice from, and I don't know how much you even know how much I'm really just like I get chills every time you come out with something. Please let us go back a little bit. I want people to know what we've already been talking about.
Yeah, I will. And I think one thing that's important is number one, when you're talking about fatherhood, it goes both ways. I get chills thinking about being in your position, like being in the spot where I got to start over again, knowing what I know now and what I would do differently or what I would do the same or the questions I have. Like it's a mirror image of being able to say, I have 2 boys, they'll be 15 and 18 in a month. And so when I look at that and I think of 4 boys to raise, I mean, that gives me chills and excitement. And so we talked a little bit about fatherhood. We talked a little bit about the next chapter and kind of what's involved. We got into the depths of the emptiness we feel as our kids grow up and what it goes in. I think we'll go back there for a minute because that'll be good. But I want to just tell you the High Performance Life podcast, because we didn't get to talk about the acronym for life. And I think this is really cool because it goes into what our conversation is. The acronym is love, impact, faith, and energy. And these are the 4 parts that I've lived my life for many, many years. And we've only in the past several years retitled it to this smooth LIFE version, but it was always 4 quadrants before. And I've been running and working off of these for overwhelm, for dream building, for goal setting, for everything I do in my life. But most importantly, love is the who's that are the most important people that we surround ourselves with. So just being here in this chair today is a who. You came to see a who in your life, and that who happened to be recording a podcast today where something happened. And so it's the who's in our life, the who's that we love. Impact is something that goes beyond our career. We talked about that. We talked about how we don't like it, where it's what do you do?
Yep.
What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
It's who are you? What do you love? And you have a couple of cool things we could talk about there. Faith, it's got to be about something bigger than ourselves, a why. So we have who, we have what, we have why. For me, understanding that my faith is the pinnacle, is the priority, not the priorities. And when that's the priority, everything else falls into place. It adds the foundation I've always needed. And it took me a long time to recognize that, but I've always been present there. I just haven't been as present as I am as I get older. And getting the ego out of the way is powerful, right?
Yeah.
But last but not least is energy. And that's how we show up to the world. It's healthy mind, healthy body, healthy spirit. And you notice the two on the bottom are faith and energy, because that's the foundation to be better to the who's in our life. That's the foundation to be a bigger impact in the world. So that's what this show is about. It's about talking about life with high performers who are doing really big stuff, but we're talking about the inside of their life.
Absolutely. A lot of people don't get a chance to talk about that. They don't know what keeps the gears going. When you see people who are constantly able to grow, regrow, sell, rebuild, or people who are in the field doing it day after day, they don't naturally get to talk about the why. You might read a book all the time talking about the why, but also when people fall, you're asking, if you need to ask those LIFEs, like where are those in your life? How constant are you taking a look at those? Do you have the foundation in place? It makes so much more sense now. Like, I need to probably evaluate that a little bit for myself.
Well, I'll tell you what, I do it every year, and I do it multiple times a year. So, and I do it for my team, and we build all kinds of things around this. This is a platform that we've built now that we're sharing with the world. But most importantly, it's helped me get where I'm at today. It's helped me have perspective. It's helped me, live in a healthy marriage for, 21 years and have two young men that I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
Who are still growing and learning, and we're still going through all that. But we really hit some good conversations on the fatherhood front, on all these things. Where do you want to go back? Because I know you want to go back somewhere.
As we talk about being proud of your sons, I'm proud of your sons. And I'm also proud of you. I asked earlier, how do I learn as a father to just let go and trust? I find that to be one of the hardest things. And right now, my let go and trust is monkey bars, right? It's tying the shoes. It's the easy things. Can you rope me back into just how you developed just starting to let go and trust, and then maybe a few challenges or times in which you had to do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. It started off by us talking about leaving my 14-year-old at a soccer academy and kind of driving home and feeling that emptiness, telling my wife, I got it. He's good. He's got it. He's ready for this. This is what he's been asking for. These are the challenges that he's ready to accept, and believing it on the surface, but then driving home and questioning everything that I believed, and knowing that by the time I got home, I had to re-believe in it, because it was my job to be the leader in our family in this challenge. When he needed to come in and mom needed to see him, I moved mountains to make it happen. We did airlines. We flew up and down in a day. We drove back and forth. I'm exhausted right now. I'm exhausted.
I can't imagine, man.
But I say that because what my boys are seeing is an example that I want them to replicate in their lives. When you see someone's dream, when you believe in someone, when you're trying to raise them to be better than who you are. Yeah. And the question you asked, the how, let me tell you what I know. And there's a ton that I don't know. Okay. The part that I know is me being me happens to have paid off in a decent way. I'm intense. I believe in discipline. My kids ate dinner when they sat at the table. They ate what we were eating. We did a lot of things that you don't see very often today, and that were more old school, that I'm very proud of watching them materialize and grow. But some of those uncomfortable moments where I was strong and I was a little aggressive at times, and I definitely was me, I see it in them and in their school. I see it in them when they play sports. I see it in them when they get frustrated. They still teach me every day. My son had a little hamstring injury a week ago now. I'll be honest with you. I right as soon as he told me, I knew he didn't want to tell me more than he wanted to deal with the injury, because I knew he was going to be waiting for my response. And I responded like the child. Immediately, I'm like, well, what could you have done differently? How do we, we got to get on this right away. And he's like, hey, Dad, just relax. I've already met with the performance trainer. I've already done this. Here's my schedule. I can't control this. And like, he's repeating back things that I need to be reminded of, because remember, we're imperfect too.
Yes, absolutely.
We're going to respond the wrong way. And so I think you just do the best you can. The advice is you do the best you can. And if you lead with love.
Oh my gosh. Come on.
If you lead with love, then they know deep down. Now, teenagers, right now, I'm the dumbest human they've ever met. I don't know anything about soccer. I don't know anything about coaching. I don't know anything about leadership. Like, I hear them telling their friends things that we talk about, but I also know that to me, I'm the butt of the jokes. I'm the laugh, and it's hard. That is hard.
Yeah.
It's a hard time for me in our family. But I also remember it's not about me.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself, we all do. We have to remember that one of my favorite things, I'll pause after this and get your input. But
oh, no, please. I'm loving this, please.
One of my favorite things is I follow Father Mike Schmitz, and he's a Catholic priest out in Minnesota at a college. And he did a great homily or sermon on you are not the main character in the story. So I have put myself as the main character in the story too many times in my life. And the older I get, the more I come to this realization, and I've tried to separate. This is my why. This is my separating the ego, putting God first, all those things, right? But even with your kids, we have to remember that if you want them, this will bring it full circle. If you want them to be the strong man that you feel you are today, you've got to have them fail. You've got to have them challenge. You have to show them who you really are. Not a puppeteered version of who you are. Yeah. And that means that they might have to hear you cuss every once in a while. They might have to see you get angry. Mm-hmm. They might have to see you react instead of respond.
Yeah.
Because you're imperfect. And when they grow up, and I sit with my dad today, and I thank him for the very things I hated him for when I was growing up.
Yeah. That's how it is. When you get full circle and you start to get that perspective, it makes so much more sense. There's so many things in like what you said that I resonate with. First is leading with love. If you go back to one of my podcasts, you'll see how I'm teaching my sons to start there. And even when I walk through the door, everybody comes in, they greet me, and I make sure I do the same thing for them. My 3-year-old, if he sees you, oh, I love your hair, I love your shirt. Like, right. They start to do that. And then another thing you said was what we call at the United States Naval Academy for the football team, 2014, you hear people say enum, which means it's not about me. Like, you're not the main character every time. And so many times I think, get down on ourselves, and things get a whole lot harder for ourselves because we're trying to be the main character. We think that everything we do is about us, or because it didn't get done, it's because of us, right? And sometimes we got to let go of that and give ourselves a little bit of grace. You talked about vulnerability earlier, and that was something that I also love, because vulnerability is a superpower. And sometimes it's not easy to start there. It's not easy to always give it, but it's tenfold when you do. It's easy. It's a lot better when you're in a leadership position and you give people vulnerability. They start getting a little bit more open with you.
Right.
But a lot of times I've seen in my own life, as like kind of growing up with my parents, it was very hard for them to be vulnerable. And me thinking that they were the superheroes in my life, when I started realizing that they were making mistakes and that they were doing things wrong, it made me attach myself. Like, I was no longer attached to them. I started seeing them on the other side as if, right, not remembering that they were human, and knowing that you're also telling your kids, hey, you got to go fail. I'm pretty sure you probably took risk and failed in front of them and got upset, so they knew that it was okay, rather than getting to a situation of completely freezing. So could you maybe tell me some of the times where that's happened for you? Because right now I'm just trying. Like, I'm telling my kids, like, hey, daddy's not perfect, but I don't think they've seen as many times of me failing as they will maybe in the future. Does that really help?
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is I don't think you have to tell them that you're not perfect. I think if anybody's going to know we're not perfect, it's our kids. I still sit with my parents, and I can find everything that I don't enjoy about them, sometimes a lot easier than the things that I remember as to why I love them. So it's like when you have a relationship and it ends, and when it ended, it's all the bad stuff that forced it to end.
Yeah.
But then there's a little separation, and all you remember is the good stuff. Or you go on a family vacation. You got 4 boys. I'm gonna tell you right now, I can put myself on a family vacation, and it is not super fun while you're going through it. Yeah. But when you get back home and they're telling their friends about how much fun they had and what you guys did and how special it was and all those things, you know it was worth it. You remember the version you want to remember.
Yeah.
The point I'm getting at is our kids are going to paint a picture of you, of us, in a way that is their version. My sister, my brother, and I, 3 of us, we all see a different version.
Yeah.
My mom still works today. She's amazing at what she does. She is probably in love with her level of performance. If she were an entrepreneur, she would have been given the opportunity. She'd be doing the same kinds of things that I'm doing. She's unbelievable, right? Mm-hmm. And my siblings and I often argue about why mom doesn't need to retire, why she does need to. We have a different version of what it means for her to live her own life. And so the point I'm getting at is your kids are seeing everything. And the best, I'm going to give you one last thing, and then I have a couple questions for you. But the one I love to talk about is you got 4 boys. So this one gets me every time. I've talked about it on my podcast before. My wife likes everything in a place. And I have never put my shoes where she tells me to put my shoes.
I feel that one. I feel it.
First of all, it's my house as well as her house. But sometimes they make it feel like it's not my house.
I got you.
And so, down to like the pictures that are, I'm like, I don't even like how I look in that picture. And she's like, yeah, but that's a good picture of us. I'm like, no, I look soft and weak in that picture and I don't like it. I want it off the wall. And, these are all little things, right? But the shoes, about the time that my son was maybe 4 or 5 years old, my oldest, I started to notice he put his shoes in the same spot. So she started yelling at both of us about our shoes not being the same spot. Hey, she'd tell him, son, you got to put your shoes over here in the mud room where they belong. Your father's wrong. He's putting his shoes in the wrong spot. Mm-hmm. And my son, Carson, would put his shoes right there. Before you know it, the second son is putting his shoes right there. Now we got 2, 3 sets of shoes all sitting in the same spot. So now mom creates a little nook right there in that spot for the shoes to go in the little nook. They're still not in the nook. They're still sitting in the same spot mine are at. And as they got older, I used to pause. I rushed through life so many times in my life. And I would find moments where I would just pause. And I seem to pause when I'm walking out the door because my ADHD has me forgetting little things. I got to go back in the door multiple times. I put something in the car, then I forget I got to get something else. And I'd be in a moment of pause. Did I turn the stove off? Did I going through that? And I'd look down and I'd see my shoes with the little shoes next to me and the littler shoes next to those. Fast forward a couple years and they get a little bigger. Fast forward today and there's a size 12 next to my size 10.5. And then there's a size 9.5 sitting next to the 10.5. My boys are passing me. And there's this feeling of just gratefulness to be able to recognize it, but it also shows the speed of which it goes. So we don't have to do anything specifically to have them watch us. I think we just have to watch it and be present where we are and remember that today, the most important, I can remember the U12 soccer games or the U10, me and the dads going, why are they not putting the best kids together? They are wasting time. I still think they should be putting the best kids together, but at the time it was so important to me and it was so unimportant in the big scheme of things, right? But these are all the types of things that the more we go back, the more I realize that I just need to be more present. And the more present we are, the more they're going to understand who you are. And then the only other thing I'll say is my dad did something really good. And that was, we got spanked yep, we were disciplined, sometimes a little more aggressively than maybe kids would be today. My dad always came in and told me how he felt afterwards. And I saw in his eyes how much he didn't like it. Even if he felt like he was wrong, he wasn't going to say he was wrong. He would just say, I love you, and I'm doing this because I love you. And I know there'll be people out there that will say, hey, that's trauma, and there's and
Stockholm.
I'm not gonna go into all that because I don't care. What I know is I am who I am today because my parents loved me first. They disciplined me, which got me uncomfortable, but I was comfortable with discipline. And as I got older, that discipline, how did that discipline, I'd like to hear about how your childhood was a little bit, but I also want to understand how that discipline helped you at the U.S. Naval Academy, how it helped you on the football field.
Absolutely, because at first I always resented, my parents for not letting me, go to the parties and be able to eat whatever I want. Like, I was the one kid on the other side of town who just didn't get to live like everybody else. And it wasn't until I got my first job and then I went to the Naval Academy and things weren't as hard for me because I already had that discipline. So there were people who were used to partying, used to talking on the phone till this late at night, used to eating whatever they wanted and used to having whatever friends. Like, I now look back and I'm like, good gracious. Like, at first I was giving all the props to my coaches who were doing some of the teaches and teaching and leaning into me.
Yeah.
But a lot of that was my parents just not allowing me to either be soft, right? Like they would say, no, that's not who you are and that's not what you do. And I know you know better. It wasn't this level of like, oh, he's just a kid or he's let boys be boys. It wasn't all of that. It was they took an investment in learning exactly who I was and then putting into me what the family culture was, like what we believe in, what are our family virtues, and then disciplining me. They led with love too by being present. I would say that my father, sometimes I would say now, was not as emotionally available. He was working a lot, but it was a mix of him working and his culture, right? Like that is...
First generation immigrant.
Yeah. He came here from Liberia, West Africa. He played pro soccer, went straight to D.C. After, he hurt his back, met my mom, and then, here I go. But just going back to that, I now realize that him being present and disciplining me and telling me to my face, this is who we are, was his love. Like, all of that was love. And I have him to point back to for that. And I have my mother to point back to for that. If I wouldn't have had that, if I just got to do whatever I wanted, to be honest, I don't think I would have made it to the United States Naval Academy. I'm from Durham, North Carolina. I know you've been around there, and I don't know if you've seen the new Durham, North Carolina with downtown. It was really nice. You can ride your bike.
It's starting to get a little bumpy, but it still has some tougher areas.
Oh, yeah.
It's still, you go off a couple streets, and it's a little different.
Absolutely. And there were times as a kid, I tried to find my way there and rebel a little bit, but because I had strong parents who cared and believed in me and wasn't afraid to tell me who I was and discipline me when I needed it, I have them to thank for today.
It's all about choice.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what we have to teach the next generation, what this generation growing up right now has to start to realize, because they struggle with it as they come into the workforce, is your parents' story is not your story. You have to choose how you receive the information that you've got and what you're going to do with it for the rest of your life. That's a choice. Yeah. And what I look back on is what you're saying is these are the foundational points they made. These are the things that your parents did to kind of almost like the bumper lanes in the bowling alley where they put up the bumpers now so that the kids can bowl. If you just have the bumpers, and the importance of having two bumpers, by the way, versus only one bumper is such an advantage.
Oh, wow.
That's another great advantage because one of my best friends, he's got a single mom, and he was with us last night at the soccer game watching my son, and he comes to all the games and watches my oldest son play and is a big part of my family's life. But he talks about things that I didn't recognize and how powerful they were for him as an ancillary person in our family. So single mom, not a lot of faith-based direction. And he told me that, back in the old days, he loved going to church with me for two reasons. Number one, he loved the community aspect. Like, he loved the way that that everybody was a part of something bigger.
Yeah.
But my mom had a rule that we had to go to mass in the morning on Sunday. If we skipped Saturday night to go out with our friends, we could go at any point in time. In the Catholic Church, you can find one. There is no excuse. There's 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., and you can go to any church in the area, and they're all going to be similar. And so there's no excuses. So there was no excuses. And the deal was she'd make us a really good brunch or breakfast when we got home. And he said, my love for food and the kitchen and cooking came from your mom. She would make us crepes. And it was, love comes in lots of different forms.
Yeah.
And it's contagious. It's not something that only you get to witness. So we get to choose. The point I'm getting at is, as I sit with my buddy and we reminisce about our lives, it's not perfect. There were imperfect parts of it. Our parents were imperfect. But the story we chose to remember is the one that makes us stronger.
Absolutely.
Makes us better. And that's what you're doing. And I want to throw some points out here that are really, really important. I love listening to young fathers talk about what it's like and thinking back about what it feels like. And if I were talking to myself, I would remind myself that you think that you have to get to this place. You're always working to get to this next place. And first-generation immigrant had me think of this as well. A first-generation immigrant believes that they're only here to provide a better life for you. Protect, provide. That's it. Like that's love. Yeah. And that's the fundamentals of love. That is protect and provide is what a father's love starts with, right? And all the other things that we define it today are way more sappy. And I do them and I believe in them. I mean, I constantly, I'm a physical touch person. I hug my kids all the time.
Yeah, man.
They hate it. My youngest son is not physical touch. He's like, why are you touching me? And I'm like, dude, because I need to touch you to show you I love you. Yeah. My oldest son, I go in and I wrestle with him and I mess around with him. And he feels the same way, but hates it, acts like he hates it. He loves every second of it.
Yeah, he does.
We all show love in different ways, but that first-generation immigrant, I even call it first-generation dad, because there's a lot of dads out there that were not present, or we're alcoholics, or we're bad examples, or we're not the best fathers, and there's way too many of them out there today. You might find yourself as a first-generation father. My dad was what I would call a first-generation father. His dad was not a great example. He was a good man later in life. I love my grandfather, but growing up, my dad and my uncle had a hard life growing up. I always say he was a first-generation father. First-generation fathers, when you're at soccer practice or baseball, or they want you to be great and they want you to have everything they never had, but they're going to also make sure you know that they never had it.
Yeah, they make sure of that part, right?
I mean, how many times did your dad say, do you know what it was like when I was growing up?
You know how many times I have to walk to school in no shoes? Yeah, there's so many stories. Don't even get me started. Yep. They make sure you know. Yeah,
I mean, he played soccer with like a concrete ball.
Yes, like he did it all. He did it all. So yeah, that's true. Like the first generation father, and the way I like to think about it, I heard Kirk Franklin talk about it. For people who don't know, like I ran track first. Of course, I played football, but track is actually my first love. And for some people, the sexy events are, the 100-meter spread and you get the hurdles.
Yep.
Our brother actually still runs. He's probably going to be running in Paris next year.
Cool.
For Liberia, which is amazing. But my thing was the 400 and the 4x4. And what I tried to think about is, as our lives continue to progress as fathers, my father was the one who had the baton. He got that baton at first from his father. Well, you would like to think so, right? But he lost his father in Civil War in Liberia. And when he came over here, he never got the chance to really build that relationship and ask him what it was like to be a dad. And, hey, my son is doing this. What should I do? So essentially, that baton was almost dropped. So here my dad is picking up that baton and running his own race, running for his life to try to protect and provide for the son that he now has. And next thing he does, he's doing it the best he can, and he passes me the baton. My job is not to look back at him and tell him all the things he did wrong. You didn't take the curve fast enough. You didn't pass this other guy. Hey, we're not in the lead. If you would have set me up better, maybe we could win this race. That's not my job. My job is to take the baton and run my own race as fast as I possibly can so that I'm able to pass the baton to my son and continue on to do that. But we always have to remember that sometimes the baton might get dropped. Sometimes you might pick up a baton that got dropped in the mud. It might be a little dirty, a little wet, but your job is not to look back. You can build some perspective, right, that to help you run your race better, right? But you're not supposed to look back and say, hey, these are all things you did wrong. I don't need you, and blah, 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 blah. Take the baton and run with it.
Yeah, it's like when you're driving. If you try to drive with only looking through the rearview mirror, you're going to wreck really quickly, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But if you look and you glance back, perspective, you glance right, left, peripheral, and you look forward and go head on, you got that baton, and it doesn't matter what's happening, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It works. It works.
Does.
I mean, the thing is, I think we have to remember that it's fun. Life has to be all of life. The hard things, the challenges, the fun. I think the older I get, the more I'm able to deal with the fact that life is going to always be a challenge. There's always going to be things that you're challenged with, and it's not going to be better if you only get here, if you only make this, if you only move here. It doesn't change. You define the parameters of your own life. And when I think about that, I have this perspective. I've tried to do something with my boys that I don't know how it'll pay off. We'll see. But I'm very, very open with them. I'm open with them about money. I'm open with them. My dad and my mom were very blue collar and very, my mom listens to this show all the time. I love my mom. I love my father. I'm very grateful for everything. But I remember, I tell a story in my book about walking home with my dad. He was riding his bike to work because we had one car and my mom had to take it and the car broke down. It was a long story. And it's 102 degrees outside, and we're walking back from the babysitters. My dad is drenched in sweat. I can see it like it was yesterday. I don't know if I was 6, if I was 10. I have no idea. I was probably younger, 5, 8, something like that, because I was home alone a lot by like 11, I think. But the point that I was getting at is I remember just looking at him and wanting to ask, there's got to be a better way. Why are we doing this? Like, I was so curious. And as I got older, and when I wrote that book, the first version of that story was from a place of not understanding, of almost frustration. Like, there had to be a better. And the second version and the second edit was a gratitude for the situation, but still a curiosity of why he wasn't doing something different. The third iteration, and the one that got into the book, was the truth. And that was me working through it in my own brain to remember I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't see that example, if I wasn't challenged to think differently, if I was given everything in a certain way. So with my sons, I tried to express to them that money is just money, that it's not as scary and as challenging. That was something, we had a scarcity mindset growing up, and I come at a total abundance. We had one of the most successful years of our lives as a family financially last year. And my son, I was in the cold plunge, and he comes outside and he asked me a question. By the way, folks, if you're listening to this and you've ever wanted to be honest, you will be honest in a cold plunge.
Yes,
so
that is true.
So I'm in the cold plunge, and he goes, Dad, you said something earlier. You said it was the hardest year of your life. But wasn't it the best year of your life? And I said, if you only define the best year of my life by financial success, it was the best year of my life. But I said, it was the hardest year of my life. There's no question that up to this point, I have not been challenged both personally, professionally, internally, from a faith perspective. Every aspect of my being was transformative last year.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, so I think the lesson is, son, that your most transformative moments come on the other side of major adversity.
Yes, sir.
And so even if it's going to pay off really, really good, you best believe it's going to suck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting there.
And it's great that you gave them that perspective too, because when you're younger, you don't get to feel that as much. You don't have those same experiences, right? And you kind of forget that if you don't have the hard, you won't get to the best. And if you've ever lifted weights, I've lifted weights my whole life. I started in high school. If it doesn't hurt, I'm not getting anything out of it. So I would love for my sons to get and understand that perspective. When it's hard right now, lean into it. Like, push through it. Don't stay there. I need you to lean into that. And remember, when you finish, that transformative year, that transformative time, that season that you're in is going to end, and it's going to be great. That's when the best is. Because for kids, they're like, how can it be the best when it was the hardest? They don't think those two equate. They don't think that they could parallel. They don't sound like the same. It was the hardest, and it was the best, and it was probably the best because it was the hardest. But now what's going to happen? You're going to get new trials. You're going to get new challenges, and you're not going to run from it because of what happened last time or how hard it was. You're just going to go get something else, man. It's going to be I'm thinking about last night. My son sat on the couch, and he almost cried talking to me and my wife. My wife was washing dishes, and I'm like, buddy, like, what's going on? Like, I can see something in your face. We just finished talking about his report card, which is a whole nother thing. But we've just finished talking about his report card, and he said, I'm scared. I was like, what's going on, man? Like, what are you afraid of? I'm afraid to go to first grade because there's things there that I don't know.
This is your oldest.
This is my oldest, 6 years old. He said that they're going to be teaching things that I don't know yet. And I was like, buddy, you have no clue how much you don't know and how many times you're going to have to walk in areas that you don't know and just have faith. Right now, that is exactly what I'm doing. And I'm learning everything from you as you tell me you dropped your son off in a different place and you're thinking about all the things you haven't taught him yet. I'm going to be transitioning out of the military, and I'm trying to move into a whole nother world. I may be changing locations. I may not be doing operations. I want to do some media, and podcasting is new. If I run from it, I mean, my son's not going to go to first grade basis. But okay, well, dad didn't do it. Like, he was afraid and he just stopped just because it looked hard. Yeah. Maybe I don't need to go to the first grade, right? And maybe that's dramatic a little bit.
No, it's the same though. And your oldest son, and I'm the oldest in my family. And it's always funny to me because my sister and I will talk about stories and she doesn't even know these things existed. But my perception of everything around me, because I was the first. So he's nervous because he's not only doing it the first time for him, he's doing it for his brothers. It's bigger than him. That's another thing that I think is really important, that I know I had that perspective because I remember this, and I will tell stories to my sister, and she's like, I don't even remember. Was I even there?
Yeah.
And then my younger son used to ride the bus. He started riding the bus when he was like 3 or 4 years old with my older son, but he didn't have to worry about it because my older son was sitting there right next to him, being a leader.
Wow.
Introducing him to friends and helping him through the next path. And then when he was getting ready to make the decision to whether or not he wanted to move away or not, my oldest son was holding him back for a year. And then all of a sudden, my oldest son looked at my wife and said, he's got to do this. And his weight of that conversation was so powerful. So you're preparing them for a role like you talked about with your cousins. Mm-hmm. You're preparing them not only to be able to go to first grade, but you're preparing him for the role that he's going to have in your family for the rest of his life. He could be the glue that holds everybody together when stuff hits the fan. And he's taken it seriously enough that he's emotional about it. That's leadership. That's exactly what he's portraying in that moment. And I think I always thought it was the biggest deal. And I would tell my mom, she doesn't understand. Second grade was so much harder, Mom. She's going into kindergarten. What does that mean? And she'd be like, well, I'm worried. And the middle, she was the second and then became the middle much later. But she does get depreciated all the time because, I depreciated it. And then, my parents, it's the second time they went through.
Yeah.
My dad once told me, he said, the day you were born was the happiest I ever was in my life. And for every firstborn child, that is usually how it works, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that I can tell you right now, I remember that moment like it was yesterday. I barely remember the second one. I didn't have 4.
Yeah.
But I barely remember the second one. But that firstborn is special. And so that fear that he has is important. And pushing that out to what you said about your transition, I think how you respond is one way, because that's how you lead by example. Yeah. But the other is how you talk about it around them. And so I think as fathers, what's really hard, and And moms, I have a lot of mothers and women that listen to this show. And this is something that we can argue about a lot, because women will tell you need to be more vulnerable. You need to open up more. If the man in your life, if the father of your children, if the father in that house opens up too much, he does the opposite of what his job is to do.
Yeah.
So you have to share with them, we have to share with them the vulnerability of the moment of saying, hey, I told him the other day, he had his brand new truck parked outside, and a landscaper at the high school during practice kicked up a rock, busted out the window. Ooh. And so whose problem is that? It's Dad's problem, right? Yeah. It's Dad's problem.
And you know it is.
Because I gotta figure out how we're going to replace it. Are we going to call insurance? Are we going to call that guy? Am I going to figure it out? I start making calls. And he kind of went through the day, like, in my mind, like it wasn't that big of a deal. So after I got it all fixed, he kind of, hey, thanks, Dad, blah, blah. Yeah. It was just another day.
Normal for him.
And the other night, I was telling you about my buddy and I having this conversation, this come to Jesus with our boys, and we were kind of getting on him a little bit. I was like, you know what? It sucks sometimes being a dad. Because at the end of the day, I was exhausted when I came home that day and you told me. But I had the wherewithal to say, you didn't do anything for that. I wasn't upset with you. 10 years earlier, I'd have been like Sebastian Maniscalco, the comedian, says, when I got a flat tire on my bike, my dad would come home and say, you're so dumb. What's wrong with you? You got a flat, like it was my fault.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I try really hard not to make it anybody's fault that I'm busy, that my life is challenging, that moment in my day was hard. So I did all these things to be a better version of myself. And then I didn't feel appreciated. So I told him about it.
Wow.
But I didn't go too deep. Mm-hmm. I didn't let it go to what I actually felt.
Yeah, it's a skill, right? You got to, how do I be vulnerable and give you this without passing it to you?
And without being too weak. Because if you get too weak as a man, you will get beat up.
Yep.
You will get walked over. Mm-hmm. You will get absolutely consumed.
Yep.
And it's not healthy. It is healthy up to a point. But there is a point for men. I'm not going to judge anybody, but I'm going to say that if I came home crying every day that I had a hard day, my sons are not learning how to handle life. Absolutely. I'm teaching them how I am not handling life. Now, if they see me get teary-eyed over a deep conversation or a challenge in my life, and I say, this is really hard for me, and they understand it, that's being vulnerable, but still going through it and working through it. And so when you're going through this next step, we should talk about this. I think we're gonna have to wrap up here shortly. Okay. Let's get about 5 to 10 more minutes, okay, and we'll wrap it. But when you're going through this next step, what are you thinking about? Like, what in your brain? What are you most scared about? What are you fearful about? Honestly,
probably what I'm most afraid about is taking things away from my family. So
would that be stuff?
It's more like stuff. It's stuff in time. Yeah, mostly stuff, to be honest with you. I think sometimes for my wife, I'm like, if I take something that I really like, but is less than what I'm making, who is it putting the burden on? Because it's not just going to be me. Is my wife going to now have to start working and not spend time with the kids and teaching our 3-year-old? Is my son's going to still be able to play the sports that they're playing? Am I going to take a job where I am getting valued financially, but not spending time with them, not being able to show up to things? That's what I'm more afraid of. And the thing is, I've had these challenges before, and they've changed, and I've grown through them. But it's the not knowing, as I think, what's scaring me the most.
Yeah. When you went into the Navy, did you know where you'd end up?
No.
How did it turn out?
Fine. I'm on the couch with you. Just fine, man.
I mean, when you went into the Naval Academy, that ain't easy.
No.
And you played football throughout that, which is even harder. How would you say those moments rank to where you are right now? Would you say that was more challenging, or do you feel like you're in a more challenging position today?
I think that those times might have been more challenging because it was all about how it led up to the moment. Who prepared me to get there? I had my coaches, I had my parents, I had my friends leaning into me and teaching me. And then when I got there, it's almost like you're all alone. Everybody else is the best too. They were the smartest at their school. They were the best at their football team. They all had state championship rings. how do I stand apart? Like, how do I make myself look different than these people? Who am I really? Like, I'm in college now.
Yeah, you're figuring it out.
And I'm figuring it out.
But you're alone. The word I was searching for when I asked that question was alone. I had a goal.
Me a little
I
bit.
planted you, but you were alone. But today you're not alone.
Amen.
And today you know more, and you have a bigger circle, and you're the leader of that circle. So at the end of the day, if you fail, we fail, right? And they learn from that. They're learning through that. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to. I think people sometimes get confused that they have to go all in and blow it all up in a year and figure it out. Like, I've always lived in chapters. I told you this earlier. I believe in building chapter 3 while I'm in chapter 2. I don't think that there aren't potentially opportunities that you could take that might be easy for you to have a job or a role, but you could be building the media empire. You could be doing these things on the side. You could be incorporating your kids. How cool would it be to have an interview with your boys, once or twice a year at different ages, and you just have a 10-minute interview where you ask them some questions. They get comfortable in front of the camera, and you're building a legacy of something that you're going to have a son that hates it. You're going to have a son that loves it. You're going to have one that mom always gives an excuse why he doesn't have to be there. He doesn't have to do it. He's the babe.
Yeah, yep. There you go.
But bring him on the journey.
Yeah.
And find that path. It doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be straight. It can be bumpy. It can be challenging. It can be all over the place. But here's what I know. Naval Academy, 4 years of football, pro mentality, Navy discipline, and now you go out into the real world. You're going to be wanted by everybody. So you find that, you tap into it, you find a job that pays you something, and you build whatever it is you want to build, and you realize that there are temporary things we do and there are permanent things we do. What are we focusing on there? And if we keep the priority, yes, which is you put God first and you understand that life is bigger than you and you're not the main character in the story, whatever you do is right. You are right where you're supposed to be.
Yes, sir. Man, you are blowing me away. And I know we only got a few minutes, so I want to make sure I get a chance to say this. Thank you. I've only got a chance to speak to you. I've only known you for, an hour right now?
It's a great hour. We had a good time,
It's an amazing hour, but everything that you've said, I can tell that you are a man that doesn't just say things. You live it. And you do it. And I've gotten a chance to see that just in this 1 hour. You talk about leading with love. You opening up to me and talking to me about my greatest fears that I'm going through right now and talking about your own life is you're loving on me. And I appreciate it. A lot of times we don't get to see men openly love on each other.
Right.
So I'm so glad we actually got the opportunity to sit down and show these people what that looks like. Men need other mentors, right? Men need other friends. We need conversations. We need to talk. And it doesn't always have to be something that's soft and nice. Hey, how you doing? Hey, you're okay. We don't always have to just feel validated. Sometimes we need somebody to keep us accountable. Hey, bro, you're good. Don't worry about that. Push harder. You got some more. We need that. So first, thank you for leading with love and choosing to love on me today. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm grateful for that, number one, but I also want you to understand when you open up with someone, you open up with them because they're worthy of opening up with. In 2 minutes, we realized that it was worth it to open up and share stories and understand where each other are at. We were having such a great conversation. Ian, who's in the other room, was recording us because he was like, this is too good. I can't miss this. Yeah. And when the guest had a snafu and couldn't make it, we were tapped right in to have a great conversation. And that's just us being who we are. That's who you are. That's why people follow you. That's why people that's why you have listeners that listen to your podcast. That's why you talk about fatherhood. That's why you ask great questions. You can't have great results if you're not asking the right curious questions. Yeah, so, I'm as grateful to learn. I think what's really interesting is great place to end. We may be at different parts of our lives with our children, our careers, etc. But I'm constantly reminded how much I learn from my boys every day, how much I learn from my father still every day. See, if we're open enough to curiosity and learning, I think the beauty is I'm learning from you as you're learning from me. And that's really, really important. And I think the last point I want to make is men don't spend enough time anymore. You know, Chris Rock used to make a joke that his wife picked all his friends and he ended up in a room and he'd be sitting next to a guy and the guy would be like, you like baseball? And he's like, I like baseball. I like baseball too. And then all of a sudden they were buddies and, you know, their wives were picking their friends. And so many men go through this fictitious friendships and all their depth of friendships are gone. We have to continue to cultivate friendships. We have to continue to cultivate mentors and people to mentor ourselves. Mm-hmm. Because part of me saying, yo, dig in, just do it, man up. You know, people hate that word now, but I mean, like but we'll still say it. Men will still say it to each other. We just won't say it when the women are around. Absolutely. And they get mad at you.
Keep it out because we know what that means.
But we know what it means. And at the end of the day, we then go home and have to remind ourselves to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So that reinforcement means we have to believe, we have to act, and we have to deliver. And it's part of who we are. It's a fabric of who we are. And that's what we're showing our kids. That's what we're talking about today is we're trying to be the example for them. And I think you're doing a hell of a job. I think whatever decision you make is going to be great.
Thank you.
I think the High Performance Life podcast is all about taking people that are high performers and doing big stuff in their life and diving deeper into subjects that are close to them. What you're getting to witness today is a high performer who's in the middle of building that high performance life. You've done high performance things all the way to this point, and you're looking at how you can build it in the next chapter. And I know everybody's going to be really interested in seeing what that's like. This is the first podcast we've ever done at the High Performance Life sitting in a studio. So you got to be the first today, and we had to test it out because we got a couple that want to fly in and do some shows. And so I am grateful to you. You gave me a chance to feel the studio out. They did an awesome job. Let's give props to Sony and the team because my guy Ian in there and your whole team, they're awesome.
Love those guys, man.
Studio's beautiful, and I'm grateful. So how do people find you?
Easy. I'm on LinkedIn. You catch me on Facebook, Instagram, but the most active place you can find me is Instagram. It's @HereForTheDads, and it's the number 4. You can do the same thing for YouTube. Here for the Dads podcast. Use the number 4.
Okay, you heard it here first. Find him, follow him, listen in, take a part in the journey, and I can't wait to see you do the podcast with the kids. I think I'd like to hear what it's like to have the conversation with your son about what he's worried about in first grade, because you know who's going to love that conversation more than anybody? Not only everyone listening, him 12 years from now.
I love it, man.
That's awesome, man. Hey, I love it. Thanks for coming and be on the show, man. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.